In the end, this ends up being another pretty low scoring game. Colorado does get on the board first with a touchdown and they get the extra point through. And late in the game, Seattle is at least able to get on the board with a field goal, but it's another miserable outing for the offense. And look, I get that Russell Wilson's finger still isn't feeling 100%, but if it's really this bad, you've got to give him a couple extra weeks rest. I mean, it's a shutout one week and then 3 points the next. Sorry, this was a hockey game? Guess that does make more sense why we were calling them Colorado, but yikes. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back once again to Kraken R&R for yet another Seattle Kraken loss. It's now 6 in a row, this time to the Nathan MacKinnon-less Colorado Avalanche. Now, this is still a good team in the Avalanche even without MacKinnon, but I think it's safe to say Seattle was looking for something a little bit better than a 7-3 loss, especially considering that all 3 of those Kraken goals came after all 7 of the Colorado ones. As far as the Kraken lineup is concerned, obviously it doesn't really matter all that much as it clearly didn't work whatsoever, and by the time we get to the third period where the Kraken are actually able to make something happen, things have already gotten switched up a fair amount. Really, the only thing of note with the starting lineup was the fact that Drieger was in goal, giving Grubauer a much-needed game's rest. Or at least that was the idea going in. Of course, they do give Grubauer that game rest when they're playing the Avalanche for the first time, which definitely had some people raising their eyebrows a bit, but it was the right idea going in, even though it doesn't even make it halfway through the game. Honestly, the Kraken managed to play the Avalanche pretty well and pretty evenly throughout the first period. But by the end of it, it's already 2-0 Colorado, and I'm pretty sure you can guess how that managed to happen. Out of the gates, the Kraken actually, I think you can make the argument, look like the better team, at least for the first 3 minutes or so, right up until Donato gets caught for a penalty, and it's on to an early penalty kill for Seattle, and about halfway through that, Gord tries to scoop a rebound away from Rantanen, which is a good idea. The problem is he scoops it backwards in front of the net through Larsson's legs and then through Lauzon, who probably should have been paying attention to Burakovsky coming in behind him, but another defensive miscue ends up on Burakovsky's stick and into the back of the net. It's an unassisted goal and it's 1-0 Colorado. Fortunately, a couple minutes later, Seattle's going to get their chance to respond as it seems like the refs are going to be calling this game pretty tight, sending the Kraken to the power play, which has actually started to heat up recently. Or at least it's thawed out from the ice-cold start to the season that it had, but either way, there's at least some hope going into this one for the first time in a while. It is fair to mention with the power play, while they did recently break an 0 for 20-something overall streak, as well as an 0 for 20-something home streak with that recent power play goal, while they hadn't been scoring any goals whatsoever of their own, they also hadn't let up any shorthanded goals yet either. Why do I mention that? Well, yeah. Early on, the Kraken power play continues to show signs of that improvement that we've seen recently, getting pressure and showing that urgency getting shots off on net. Unfortunately, some of that urgency in creating pressure leads to McCann trying to pressure a puck along the boards with nobody behind him. The puck gets past him and sends Nichushkin on a breakaway, which he converts on the other end. It's a shorthanded goal for Colorado. It's 2-0 for them. For Seattle, it's another Kraken first, though clearly not the good kind, as this is the first shorthanded goal allowed in franchise history. And yes, they are still looking for their first shorthanded goal of their own, but with this penalty kill cooling off faster than a freshly Zambonied sheet of ice, I don't think we're too eager to try to go for that one. So if your guess as to how the Kraken got down 2-0 while playing decently well for the vast majority of the period was a couple of defensive breakdowns and a goalie getting beat on a breakaway, then congratulations, you hit the empty net. So here we are again with the Kraken once again playing from behind early on after another first period that they'd probably like to have back. Even if there were some bright spots here and there, they're still at a deficit going into the first intermission, and also back to old tricks with another goal given up in the first 5 minutes of a period. But time to take a deep breath. The Kraken did at least show signs of life in the first period, and they had a couple of pretty decent scoring opportunities. So with the second period coming up, which is one that they've been dominating for the most part this season, I think that there's at least a chance they could get back into this one, right? Nope. Not even close. Not close whatsoever. 3 minutes into the period, which our eagle-eyed viewers will notice is once again within the first 5 minutes of yet another period, it's Cale Makar from the blue line through a screen that is comprised of just about all the players on the ice and into the back of the net. It's 3-0 Avalanche. At this point, there are starting to be some signs of frustration, but 3-0 still isn't an impossible hill to climb. It's definitely not ideal, but you did at least give up those goals pretty quickly, so there's plenty of time to start climbing up it. That is going to be harder to do from the penalty kill though, which is what the Kraken go on to pretty quickly after this third goal is allowed. So it's the Avalanche to the power play, the puck drops, and it's in the back of the net. Once again, it's Burakovsky, and honestly, it's Burakovsky again for the second time on the power play and his second goal in the game. It's 4-0 Avalanche, and that's going to do it for Drieger as Grubauer comes in at this point. So he does get his chance to play against his old team, which he does pretty well for at least the first 7 minutes or so, right up until the Avalanche get a 2-on-1 breakaway, which includes Cale Makar, who has the puck. And well, I understand that the instinct and probably even the coaching is to take away the pass and let the goaltender handle the shot in a 2-on-1. If there's one guy on the Avalanche with McKinnon out that you maybe want to take the shot away from rather than the pass, it might be Makar, and he is going to demonstrate why. 5-0 Avalanche. Then a few minutes later, Erik Johnson gets lost in the defense, gets a completely free shot off from the faceoff circle, which really isn't the end of the world. Grubauer is able to get back in enough time to get fully set up to take this shot. Plus, Johnson isn't Makar, Landeskog, Rantanen, or I guess tonight Burakovsky. Not that it matters because this one gets past Grubauer and into the back of the net, 6-0 Avalanche. And yes, this is one that Grubauer absolutely has to come up with, even if it doesn't really end up making a difference when you're down 5-0. Mercifully, the Kraken do make it through the last 3 minutes of the second period without giving up another goal, though Tanev's stick does not end up making it to the locker room. That gets smashed on its way off the ice, and then I'll give you one guess as to whether or not the Kraken are able to get through the first 5 minutes of the third period without giving up another goal to the Avalanche. If you guessed that they wouldn't be able to, you're correct, as 4 minutes and 47 seconds into the third period, it's Sherwood with a shot off on goal that rebounds right to a number of Kraken players, but in the middle of all them is Nicholas Abe-Kubel, who puts it into the back of the net as he is able to get to it before Dunn can. And the extra point's good, it's 7-0 Avalanche. Now, at this point, I think it's safe to say, and you probably could have said this after the fifth goal went in, that there's a fair amount of frustration on the Kraken side of the ice, and that's starting to boil over quite a bit, and really to some extent already has been. The refs, for their part, having called a pretty tight game early on in the first, have had to swallow their whistles in order to not have half of both benches in the penalty box. That having been said, eventually, the Kraken are actually the team that ends up drawing the penalties and going to the power play. And I don't know if it was the fuel of all that frustration or just the continued progress of a power play that, for the Kraken, really has started to all of a sudden look a lot better over these last few games. Either way, they were playing with a purpose in this power play, even if it was just to prevent the first ever shutout for the Kraken. Either way, it ends up converting as Eberle picks off a rebound and puts it into the net, to get the Kraken at least onto the board. It's 7-1. And sure, even with 14 minutes still left in the game at this point, it's basically a garbage time goal, but it does at least prevent the Kraken from getting shut out for the first time ever, and for Eberle, it continues his now 7-game point streak. And in a game like this one, it's the little things. Then shortly after that goal goes in, I don't know if it was just Colorado's weird way of showing pity on the Kraken, or if they really wanted another chance to stop what has up to this point still been one of the worst power plays in the league, but either way, they send the Kraken right back onto the power play. And once again, the Kraken power play is looking good, getting shots off on goal and creating scoring chances, even if they're not able to convert on any of them. right up until the literal last single second of the power play, at which point it's Tanev's turn to pick up a rebound and put it into the back of the net. It's now 7-2 Kraken. And for Tanev, he's finally back on the board with his now 7th of the season in 17 games for the Kraken, which I point out because 7 is the same number of goals that he scored last year in 32 games with the Penguins. So, again, the small things. Plus, also with this goal, the Kraken are now ahead 2-1 win on the power play in this game. Of course, you'd really like to not have that one, but it still is 2 power play goals, and actually 2 power play goals on back-to-back power plays. Who is this, Edmonton? Looks at 4-12-1 record. Nope, definitely not Edmonton. And at this point, even though the game is still pretty clearly out of reach, you can start to hear some chants erupting throughout the arena, which still has a fair number of people in it to Seattle's credit. Little pat on the back there. I mean, far more than have been to a Buffalo game yet this season. Sorry, unnecessary shot, but you can hear the fans start to chant, 5 more goals, 5 more goals. And then, wouldn't you know it, but Blackwell somehow sneaks one in between Kemper's foot and the post, and it's 4 more goals, 4 more goals. But as we know, that is where the late Kraken surge would come to an end, as they end up losing this one 7-3. It's another Kraken loss, and this time a particularly ugly one. For all of you everly optimistic people out there, yes, they do end up responding in the third period and winning it 3-1, but you can't go down 6-0 in the first 2 periods and really completely forget to play the second period altogether. So, in the game after the one where we talked about who was to blame for the slow Kraken start, they demonstrate just about everything that's gone wrong to this point in the season, all in one game. Yes, there still were some silver linings here and there, but here's hoping that down 7-0 on a 6-game losing streak was the low point for this team, and they can use that huge amount of frustration that they went into that locker room in the second period with, and use it to bounce back not just in the third period of this game to make it a little bit less embarrassing, but to actually start getting some wins on this record and try to climb out of the hole that they've built themselves, even if it doesn't end up making the playoffs, to at least have a season that isn't one that you'd rather forget. And yes, it's still true that for the majority of most of the games the Kraken have played so far this season, you can make the argument that they looked like the better team, or at least were a competitive team for most of the game. Even though that was clearly not the case tonight, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. All I am trying to say is that, putting tonight's game completely aside for a second, if they are able to continue to play the way that they have for the majority of this season and clean up some of those mistakes that have been costing them in the close games, then the wins will start to come. And you'd have to think that they'll start coming sooner rather than later. I mean, let's just take a quick look at the schedule coming up here over the next few games. Oh no. Yeah, I'd buckle in. This losing streak could be going on for a while. Of course, fingers crossed that it doesn't, but either way, if you have made it to this point in the video, thank you very much for watching. If you did like this video more than you like the game, then there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that I would appreciate you using. Of course, the comment section is always there for your thoughts or just general venting at what's going on right now. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.